Week 4 inside black and gold, and it is Falcons hate week as we roll on into a Sunday noon kickoff in the ATL. Sorry, they just got hit by a storm, and now we're going to hit them with some Saints football this week. How you doing, Jeff?
They got hit by a storm, and they'll have Storm at right tackle.
Good luck to them.
Whoa. I mean, that's just my assumption, but Storm Norton is their backup right tackle. Anyway, Falcons hate week is here. And no one really emphasizes that better than Cam Jordan. We're going to talk about Cam Jordan a good bit in this first segment. We're going to do kind of a rundown. Not a ton of news, but there is news. So we're going to hit that. I want to talk about Cam's role, like his kind of diminished role and how he's handling it. I want to talk about Tyrann Mathieu's interception because we never really got to that earlier in the week, but I got some really interesting insight into what happened on that play, and I want to break it down. So we'll talk about that. Second segment, we have an interview with host and producer of Dirty Birds and Brews, Kevin Knight. He's going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons, what he sees, how things have developed for them over 3 weeks. They're 1-2, could be 3-0. Hopefully they're 1-3 after this week. So we'll talk about that final segment. We're going to break down X factors as always. Got some bites from Derek Carr, Clint Kubiak on something that I think is going to be very significant in this matchup. So we're going to talk about that. Also going to hear from Deuce McAllister on a similar subject. Mr. McAllister.
Mr. Nostradamus, now predicting plays like he's Tony Romo out there.
Nostradamus.
Yeah.
Is what Robert calls him, and I think Tommy wants to call him Deustradamus, or I don't know. You could go either way. You could start with the nose. You could start with the deuce. One way or the other.
As long as he keeps seeing good things coming, I like it.
As long as he's predicting positive things and they're happening. If he starts predicting negative things, we're going to tell him to shut up.
Right.
Stop. You are causing this. Anyway. But yeah, so first things first, it's Falcons hate week. Let's go to the official Falcons hate week narrator, Cam Jordan. Cam.
Atlanta hate week?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they were
the failed clowns.
they were
absolutely
with the way the game ended last year.
I don't care what they're pleased with. What does that have to do with us? If you want forgiveness, go to your mother. I'm sure she'll say sorry for you. I got nothing for you. Look to Jesus. He forgives everybody.
Do you think they'll come
Sorry,
to the
Lord,
game
that was
a little
blasphemous.
bit different than because of how last game went? Like, do you think the Falcons are going to?
I don't care how they feel. This is the NFL. This is a winning business. We were in position to win.
That's why we love Cam Jordan.
When I transcribed that earlier, I just transcribed it. I thought he said fail cons. He actually called them the fail clowns.
Clowns, yeah.
Which, man, that's a double hitter. Anyway, I do appreciate. I feel like, like Cam gets it.
Yes.
Cam understands how this is supposed to be. Sometimes I don't feel like DA necessarily gets it. And obviously he's referring to he was being asked about that because of the way last year ended, the 48-17, the Jamal Williams touchdown of the victory formation. I think much ado has been being made about nothing. I don't think players necessarily go into games with that type of energy. Like, it's like, you got a lot to focus on. You're not thinking about that play last year. The same way, like this idea that like, I've seen people be like, the Saints played dirty and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's, I don't buy that.
For me, a lot of it deals with no Jameis Winston, who was the clown that, decided to change the play.
Right. I mean, like, so many players are different, and, I feel like Justin Simmons isn't going to be in there being like, go get him.
Right.
Matt Judon wasn't part of that game, so we'll see. But I don't know, like if it was Arthur Smith still there,
sure,
I see him using that as something. But he got fired. And they're probably happy he got fired. So they should send the Saints a thank you note that they put the nail in to make sure he got fired. But either way, we'll talk about that. Just a few notes, right? So Alvin Kamara back at practice. He missed Wednesday's practice. He was there on Thursday. He was limited. I feel like he's going to try to go. I just question how much a rib injury like the one he has will limit you in the course of a game as a running back the first time you take a hit, because like where do you get hit as a running back? You get hit in the ribs constantly.
That, and how good is he running with a bad hip too?
He looks fine. I don't think
okay.
That's like I watched him out there at practice on Thursday, and you would not know any better.
Okay.
Or if you he's clearly no. He was limited, so I don't know exactly how much work he got in team drills, but I don't think that's going to be the problem. I think it's, can he take a hit and not be writhing in pain every time, and so it's impossible to know that. I do give him a lot of credit for wanting to play, right? In this situation, you could say, hey, you wouldn't pay me. Why am I going to play through a significant injury? But I think you do have to give him a lot of, and I've said this before, he's doing everything the way you hope a guy will do it when you sign him to a long-term contract, right? In terms of he wanted a rework deal. You didn't give it to him. He's still out there taking 29 carries and taking hits and playing through injuries. So you got to give him a lot of credit for that. I expect him to be out there. I just don't know exactly what his workload is going to be. Maybe if you kind of dial it back a little bit, and how he handles contact when he inevitably gets it.
Well, that'd be interesting, because after last game, who are you going to end up dialing up for more action in the running game? Obviously, Taysom's back, but I don't know what Jamal Williams' role is anymore. And then will we finally see Jordan Mims? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know for sure on that. I do think you're going to see a lot more Taysom in the run game, but how is he feeling? How's that chest injury? He was a full participant, but are you ready to give him a full workload? And if he takes big hits, is that going to be kind of a recurrence for him? So, injuries this is the time of year where all we talk about is injuries, and here we are.
Well, we need Taysom for sure. He's a dirty bird killer. So
he is. And it does sound like he will be out there. So that's a good thing. Cesar Ruiz was not out there Wednesday or Thursday. We're recording this prior to Friday's practice, so that could change on Friday. I am very pessimistic about his availability, and I could be wrong, but I also look at that game and I say, hey, Cesar Ruiz is not as bad as he looked in that game, right? And you go back and you watch him, he's getting whipped on almost every play, and you will not convince me that his knee issue was not a factor throughout that game. And obviously Jalen Carter is a guy that you don't want to go up against ever because he's that good. But when you're at a disadvantage and your knee is not in a good way and you can't move the way you need to, yeah, that's a problem. So I almost wonder, even if he was willing to try to play through it, are you better off going with a backup if he is that limited? And so we'll see. But if not, you're kind of going into it and you're saying, I still think it's Shane Lemieux at center. And you're going to try to figure it out. Probably Landon Young at right guard if Cesar can't go, and then Lucas Patrick at left guard. And you're going to kind of rework that communication. You're probably going to have Lucas deal with a lot of the communication. I'm going to put Shane in, but I'm not going to put too much on him from a communication perspective. I'm going to say, go play center, right? Snap the ball. Worry about snapping the ball.
That still scares me though, too, because he hasn't really done it.
Never. Right, he did not play center for this season. There's this idea is hey, he's a center guard. The idea has always been he can play center. He hasn't actually done it. He didn't do it with the Giants, and I think that's more due to the fact that he was hurt constantly with the Giants, so he never really got a chance to be multi-positional. It was can he get on the field at all? But I mean, he has the build, he has the makeup to be a center. So we'll see. Hopefully, he worked there all throughout camp. He worked there in the preseason. Obviously, he had his struggles in that 49ers game. My worry is snapping the ball in the shotgun, because I think in a game, if you get nervous and suddenly
why not just keep Lucas there just because you want to keep him at guard?
I mean, I think if you want to keep things consistent. I understand why in a game you would make that change and say Lucas is your backup, because you don't want to carry a backup center on game day just to have a backup center, because the roster spots are so you only have 48 active players, right? So you don't want to just devote a guy as your backup center. But with a week to prepare, I think if you can keep other positions consistent, you want to do that, right? And so Lucas has been a very, very good left guard to this point in the season.
Yeah.
And so how am I better off? Am I better off putting him there and getting, maybe slightly better center play, and
or a guy that's never done it before?
And but I mean, I guess, but what level of center play are you going to be getting versus what would the increase be over Shane if you put him in there, versus what level of left guard play are you going to get versus the backup that you'd be putting in there? And I think if you can maintain your continuity on the left side of the offensive line, and hopefully that still is a strength for you, then you at least have a strength, right? if you end up with a backup right guard, a backup center, and a backup left guard with a rookie left tackle and a rookie right tackle, where are you running? What is your strength? I don't think you have one. So that's kind of where I feel like if I'm the Saints, that's how I'm looking at it. Is I have a week to get this guy ready. He's been working at center all preseason. We feel like he can get the job done, and that's where I go. So that's where I am with it.
Your first action comes on the road in Atlanta and a big game that you need to, rebound after a loss. That just worries me too.
He's
Obviously,
a big boy.
The situation isn't good overall.
He's a big boy. He can handle it. A couple more things. I don't think Demario Davis is going to play. Now, I think he's going to try to play, but we'll see. But he's dealing with a hamstring issue. This is what Joe Woods said when he was asked about Demario's situation.
Were to not have Demario Davis this weekend, how much of an impact does that have on him?
That would be a huge impact. I mean, he's definitely the quarterback of our defense, our emotional leader. He's meant a lot to our defense, to this whole team for a long time, but it would be tough.
Yeah. How do you feel confidence-wise in terms of guys like Pete Werner, Willie Gay, others stepping up?
Yeah, absolutely. Those guys, they're proven. I know Willie's new, they're proven, but I think the guys prepare. I think Haji does a great job with them. So if that's the case, I believe we'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like in this season in particular is one of the only times I've felt like, hey, you actually have the pieces for if Demario misses a game, you feel okay about the guys you're putting in there. And, with Willie at middle linebacker, maybe, I don't know how they're going to split it up. But I also feel okay about either Anthony Orji or DeMarco Jackson taking snaps there. I kind of feel like as much as you don't want to be without Demario when you're dealing with a hamstring issue, is pressing it going to increase the likelihood that you lose him for an extended period of time? Like you look at the Marshawn situation in week 2, I feel like this is a similar situation. So we'll see, but I don't feel confident that he's going to play.
I'm at least confident that Demario knows his body and obviously won't push it if he can't do it. But man,
you really think
I know
that?
he hasn't missed any games since coming to the Saints.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I don't buy that. I think that
Demario still trying to be out there knowing that it would be more of a detriment.
Well, I mean, I think that Demario believes he's capable of anything. Right? Like Demario is the same guy who said like the doctors gave him a 0% chance to play last year on Thursday Night Football, and he played through it anyway. Like, so that's who Demario is. I think at a certain point you got to be like, guy, it's not going to happen, and that's a tough conversation to have with a veteran leader, veteran linebacker, but it might be the best course of action to make sure you don't lose him for an extended period of time. And also, I'm just not sure how effective he's going to be able to be. Like that 65-yard Saquon Barkley run, they say, hey, we were out of our gaps. Who was out of his gap? It was Demario. Like that's he needs to scrape over and close that hole, and he couldn't do it, or at least he was unable to do it there. And when you're dealing with a hamstring injury, and suddenly there's a misfit gap, and there's a 65-yard touchdown run, I don't know. So we'll see. But
no, and we know obviously Bijan's got that home run hitting power too.
Yeah, right. Like it's the same situation where you can bottle him up all game and then you miss one gap and gone, and you're not catching him the same way you're not catching Saquon. But a couple other things, and this segment kind of got longer than I wanted to, but Cam Jordan only played 20% of the snaps last week. Cam is clearly a backup defensive end on this Saints roster. And here's the thing. Cam being your second string defensive end, even though the depth chart is lying to you, it's only a problem if has a problem with it. And what I mean by that is like, who do you want as your depth defensive end? Like if you had to go to a backup, who would you not feel good about saying, hey, we have Cam here? As a veteran leader, taking a guy's role away can be a problem if that veteran leader makes it a problem and does not handle it well and starts to become an issue. I don't feel that way about Cam. And I think so to some extent, saying, hey, we're going to go with Chase and Carl, which is what DA effectively said earlier this week. And we still have this really effective team leader who we feel like can do all of these things if we need him to, and we can keep healthy and rested and fresh. I feel like that's a good thing. I feel like that's a positive thing for this team.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, with Cam being such the teammate, the selfless guy that he is, not making it an issue at all, because obviously, it's a huge ego blow to a guy that's been such a leader around the team on and off the field, and continues to still be. But yeah, I know a lot of fans' frustration, obviously, there with a lack of his production right now.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I don't mind the lack of production if you're not getting snaps. Like, it's not an issue if you're not getting snaps, right? The issue is a lack of production when you're playing 80-90% of the snaps, right? Now, if he's a situational player, I look at his Von Miller with the Bills, right? Like, if I don't mind having Von Miller on my roster, but I cannot play Von Miller 3 downs. I play him situationally. If I can do the same thing with Cam, now the situations are going to be different because Von Miller and Cam are 2 very different players in terms of pass rushers. But like, if I just have a very strong quality veteran player that I can use when I need him and when he makes the most sense to play, that was always my issue. Was not, hey, Cam is not aging. It's, we are playing him as if he's not. We are playing him as if there is no drop off in production when there clearly is. So I don't know. And this is Tyrann talking about how Cam has adjusted in that role. I thought he had a good take on it.
Yeah, I mean, Cam's a pro. I think he'll be a pro about it. I think the competitor in him, obviously, is probably, a little heavy on him. You know what I mean? Just kind of weighing on him. And I think as his teammate, you just want to keep him encouraged. Like his value, all of his value isn't in disrupting the quarterback. You know what I'm saying? Like he has a lot of value in, leading this with the young guys in his room and, kind of being that extension from coaches to players. And then his experience too, man. Like, he's seen a lot, he's made a lot of plays. And so, like he shouldn't feel, down about himself. Like he'll be in the Hall of Fame one day, you know what I mean? So, I think this is part of his story. Him, just kind of, embracing that new role, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and so just generally speaking, like Cam is a leader in that room. So the way he handles it is more important than how the Saints necessarily handle it. And I think he's handled it well, so I feel good about it. Now, Cam came into this season saying, hey, I want to win a Super Bowl. And I think the way he's approaching it is, hey, if this helps us win a Super Bowl, I'm down for anything. Now, if suddenly you lose 2 or 3 games, I'm interested to hear how maybe that tone changes a little bit. But for now, I think everything's kind of working out the way that they thought it would with Chase and Carl. Both of them, I think, have played very well. So if you just get those guys on the field more, find a way to get Cam Jordan kind of involved and in that rotation, I think you're in good shape.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Cam, and just obviously with age, Father Time don't lie. You can't beat Father Time with him, and I feel like he can obviously still contribute big time in run defense, but yeah, the pass rush numbers just don't seem to be there for him.
No, they're not. They're not. And we'll see how that goes. And guys are going to get hurt. He's going to get on the field, right? That's the thing. Like the idea that you're not going to deal with injuries and need your 3rd string, 4th string defensive ends is not how it works. Like,
well, yeah, even you talked about how big and strong and amazing Chase Young looks. His conditioning still wasn't there like late in game.
Yeah, we'll see, right? And again, I think you do have some level of a rotation, but those guys are going to be the guys on the field for important snaps. Speaking of a guy who doesn't come off the field, so kind of tease this. Tyrann Mathieu. I asked, like I was talking about the interception at the end of the first quarter or beginning of the second quarter, I guess, in that game. And I was impressed with it. But then I asked Joe Woods about it, and he said something interesting. So I dove into it a little bit. This is what he said on that interception.
What are your thoughts on Tyrann's interception?
That was great. Just going into it on that particular play, we were expecting a certain play based on our film study, and they ran something different, but he saw it. So I was like, man, I was dapping him up on the sideline. I said, great job,
Okay, so what does that mean? Now, this episode has kind of become this is where I sneak in some film study stuff so the company hopefully doesn't notice and yell at me because they don't like me using all 22 footage. But so I asked Tyrann about this, and what he told me was he realized earlier in that drive that the Eagles had included plays in their game plan specifically to try to target him, and not because they found a weakness in his game, but because they knew that he would know what they were going to do. So they were flipping it preemptively in order to mess with him because they knew he would have been watching it on film and know, hey, out of this look, they're going to do this. And so they're like, he's going to jump it. So we're going to go opposite. And the play that he realized that on was the long pass to Dallas Goedert earlier in that drive that kind of set the red zone opportunity to start the second quarter. And so let's see. I just need to find this clip. Yeah. So this is the play, right? It's kind of a pump 7. And so what you'll see is you'll have Dallas Goedert coming. He's on the right side. He's at the top of the screen. Tyrann's in the middle of the field, right? So you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, I know what's coming here. He's going to go on the 7. Dallas kind of fakes the 7. Tyrann opens up that way, and he breaks back across the field. Jalen Hurts is watching it the whole way. He knows the play. So it's like, you watch Tyrann at the end of this play. He'll get up and just be like, what was that? I don't. That's not what I saw on film. They changed this, and this is the moment he's like, they've added plays into their game plan specifically so that they know I am expecting this, and they're flipping it. And you heard Joe Woods there saying, hey, they ran something we didn't expect. We didn't see it on film, and he just knew what was coming. So fast forward to the interception, right? This is later in that drive, and so Tyrann's sitting there like, I know they have these plays in the game plans. Tyrann on the right side in the 2 deep look. He's like, I know they have these plays in their game plan where they're just doing it specifically to mess with me. So they come out and they're yelling Falcon, Falcon, and they know, hey, this is an outbreaking concept. We've seen it on film. You can see on the other side of the field, he's breaking out. This guy's Devontae Smith is bluffing the outside break. Tyrann just sits there and he's like, hey, I know what they're doing, and he just steps in front of the ball. And it's like they literally ran this play to mess with him. They're going at him, trying to use his own film study against him, and he preemptively like screws them up and not only breaks up the play, gets an interception. And like, this is the type of play that's like it looks good on film, and then you figure out, you understand like the background to it, and you're like, that's a Tyrann Mathieu Hall of Fame type. Like, that's why he's a Hall of Famer, because not only is he forcing the other team to take time in their week to change their own schemes to account for the fact that he knows what they're going to do, he reads it before they do it and breaks it up anyway. I don't know. I just thought that was fascinating. And this is Tyrann kind of talking about that moment.
Early in that drive, I realized that they had a few plays schemed specifically for me. And so once I got in the red zone, I'm like, well, like maybe this is one of those Tyrann plays. Like, they know I watch film, and they know like I'm going to see the outbreakers. Like, it was just break across his face. So, yeah, I was already like on alert when Goddard hit me with the 7 pump, over the middle. So I was like, okay, now they got a few plays in there specifically, for me to test my, aggressiveness or whatever. So, yeah.
Didn't work.
No.
Yeah. So I don't know. I just found that kind of fascinating. And it's like, because you have an appreciation for what Tyrann Mathieu brings to this defense, but like that type of stuff, that's stuff that people don't do. That's stuff that, like a defensive coordinator, he sends those guys out there with a plan. That's why Joe Woods is like so excited that Tyrann made that play, because his plan was wrong. Tyrann made it right. I don't know.
You think eventually for him, he's going to be one of those dudes that gets into coaching a Tyrann Mathieu?
We'll see. I don't know. It's tough.
Obviously, you hear about the long hours and everything you have to do with the coaching gig, but I just feel like his obvious knowledge and what he can pass down to dudes is just so valuable.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like when you like look at like an Ed Reed, right, like a Troy Polamalu, like
no, right,
star players typically don't get into coaching. Like, look around the NFL and tell me which like star players, like Mike Singletary is like one of the, like, so every now and then you'll see a star linebacker, like Mike Vrabel got into coaching, right? He was very good, but typically it's depth players, it's backups who spend a lot of their time game planning and doing kind of that secondary stuff anyway.
How would you categorize like an Aaron Glenn?
Yeah, I mean, like, not a superstar,
I know you're saying not the outlier and always, but yeah, typically it is not your star players, right?
Yeah, so I mean, like look at a Tom Brady, like a guy like that, like Drew Brees was never going to get into coaching, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, but like you'll see quarterbacks get into coaching, but it's like a John Harbaugh, right?
Yeah.
Guys like that, Dennis Allen, right? Dennis Allen was a very good football player, but he was not a.
Dan Marino, like you're saying, Dan Marino's never getting into coaching.
Right. A lot of times it's going to be these gym rat guys who made NFL rosters because they worked really hard and understood the game at a high level. A lot of times it's offensive linemen, right? And rarely will you see like a Joe Thomas get into coaching, but a lot of times you'll see kind of that 12-year, offensive line starter that just was married to the grind. Anyway, so I don't know. I'd be surprised if Tyrann got into coaching, but I mean, when you're a guy that processes the game the way he does, I think he could.
Maybe like a specialist. Then they just call him in every once in a while to give some tips.
Yeah, sure. Like Malcolm Jenkins, right? Like that was this year. He was with the Saints in camp, kind of coaching. They want to get guys into coaching. Like they bring these guys back, hoping like maybe they could kind of get them hooked.
I want to go home. That's all right. I don't want to spend my entire day in the facility.
Right. I'd rather call into the talk show once a week and do it that way. But Streif is a perfect example of a guy who was like one of those grinders who was just around forever. And it's like, yeah, he's the guy who gets into coaching. Jari Evans is a good example of a superstar offensive lineman who got into coaching.
Right.
That's probably the best example I can think of locally. He's a Hall of Famer. But yeah. You
don't think eventually when the kiddos get older for Drew that he might think about coaching at all, or nah?
No, I don't. I genuinely, he might coach like high school. I could see him coaching high school.
Why bother with the NFL level? Ugh.
He's got too many irons in the fire. You can't run pickleball fests and also be a quarterback's coach. You just can't do it. But all right, let's wrap up this segment. We're going to come back with an interview with Kevin Knight, host of the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Get some info on the Falcons. Get ready for week 3. And we'll come back and hit X factors for this game. Who dat? Go Saints. We will be right back. And we're back on Inside Black and Gold. Jeff Nowak and Steve Geller. And as promised, we were bringing in Kevin Knight, host and producer of Dirty Birds and Brews podcast covering the Atlanta Falcons. And, it's Falcons hate week here. I guess it would be Saints hate week on your end of the equation. How do you celebrate? What is your go-to I hate the Saints, ritual for these matchups, if you have one?
Yeah, I mean, I usually just go down to when I lived in Northwest Florida, I would just go to the most like Cajun place imaginable in like full Falcons gear and just like pound some like shrimp and grits and all this stuff. It's like, I'm taking all this, I own this now. That's usually my ritual because, New Orleans has great food. There's no doubt about it. But, you always get even in Florida, that's pretty much, like Central Time Florida is pretty much Saints country. So that was always a good time.
Yeah, this matchup is always fun. The names and faces change, but there's always this like level of energy to it that is hard to match. We asked Cam Jordan about it, and it was like, this one's interesting to me because the way last year ended with 48-17 and the victory formation touchdown and all that malarkey that occurred in that game. I'm just curious, as you look at this matchup, does that matter to you? Do you feel like that matters to the Falcons right now? It kind of feels like every time you get into a new season, I don't even remember what happened last year, but that one was so kind of poignant. The head coach got fired. The Saints head coach was apologizing afterward. It was a weird thing. So how do you land on this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I know that there are definitely players that are upset about it. So they will care. I think with the coaching staff changing at the top, the coaching staff probably isn't as invested in it as they would have been otherwise. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those kind of unspoken rules in the NFL is that you don't run plays out of the victory because you don't want anyone blowing up your victory formation.
Right.
So I don't know what'll happen with that. I imagine there's some pretty upset. There's definitely upset fans and upset players, but also a lot of new faces on both sides. So, I don't know how much it'll matter, but I know that Jesse Bates and Justin Simmons definitely have been buying into the rivalry. So, I mean, it's going to be testy out there. I mean, we know it will be. So,
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Early on, getting these NFC South matchups, we're usually, accustomed maybe towards the middle or the end of the year. But yeah, I know the Saints are boat loaded, top heavy with a lot of these divisional matchups, and obviously Atlanta week, always big. Going to the ATL, going to be interesting this week. I know that they're kind of a mirror image on offensive line, dealing with a lot of injuries there as well. Starting center gone, and also it's not looking like Jake Matthews, a tackle, is going to be able – not Jake Matthews, I'm sorry, Caleb McGarry, who's dealing with the knee issue. Jake Matthews appeared on the injury list, but he was just non-injury related issues.
Yeah. I mean, and I know the Saints lost Eric McCoy, so their center's down. And then Cesar Ruiz isn't practicing, and I know some of the depth guys maybe were questionable at this point. So, yeah, just a lot of offensive line injuries really fast, and that definitely, I'm sure it impacted the Saints game as well. But, yeah, in Atlanta, like the Falcons were rolling. They were up 14-7 on the Chiefs, and they lose the center, or they lose Caleb McGarry, and 4 plays later they lose Dahlman, and the offense kind of couldn't. I mean, Steve Spagnuolo, to his credit, he was like, all right, we're sending everything now, and they couldn't get anything going on offense for basically a quarter and a half while they tried to figure out what to do there. And then fourth quarter they got it together, didn't quite get it done. I know there's still a lot of people upset about the end zone no call that would have given Atlanta an opportunity, or a couple of opportunities from the one. Who knows how it plays out after that, but yeah, tough situation. And I know New Orleans is dealing with even more stuff. I mean, I at this point, it looks like for Atlanta, McGarry is probably the one that's not going to play. The other guys seems like it's more maintenance related. We'll see if anything else crops up, on Friday. But I mean, I know with the Saints, Demario Davis ended up on there. I know Kamara returned to practice yesterday, so that's at least a little bit more hopeful. But which injuries are you guys the most concerned about from the Saints' perspective?
Most of them.
Yeah. Well, they're all huge players, so
yeah, right. It's because the injury list is like a Pro Bowl roster. Yeah, like Alvin's got a rib injury. It's like you deal with a rib injury. It's like, yeah, you can get back to practice. What happens when someone spears you in the ribs, right? Yeah. That doesn't feel too good. And Demario, I'd be surprised if Demario plays, but we'll see. It would be the first time he's ever missed a game with the Saints with an injury. So I don't think Caesar's going to play. Eric's obviously not going to play. So yeah, it's a problem.
Taysom's back.
There you go.
And hey, for any matchup, I want Taysom. It's the Falcons.
Yeah, he kills the Falcons. Yes.
But no. So let's just obviously, anytime you replace head coaches, there's this I call it kind of the rookie head coach bump, where everyone's excited about stuff until it goes bad, right? And like they give you get that kind of grace that, other than Dennis Allen, because Dennis Allen got none of that. But like in your first season, it feels like, okay, we'll give him a chance. Arthur Smith was such a grind to get through that anyone else feels like it's easier to root for him. But what has been your impression of Raheem Morris through 3 weeks? It's funny because you look at him, you look at Todd Bowles, you look at Dennis Allen. All 3 guys are head coaches in their second opportunity who failed dismally, I will say, in their first one. But for some reason, there's a much happier vibe around Todd or around Raheem at this point. And he's a good coach. He's coached on both sides of the ball. He's interesting in that way. What have you seen from him? What's your vibe on him through 3 weeks?
Yeah, the players really love him. He's more in that like Dan Quinn vein of like he's a relationship builder and like a team cohesiveness guy. And I would say where Raheem has the advantage over Quinn is that he's worked with a lot of different staffs over the years, and he has all the connections. So the Falcons brought in coaches from all over the place. They ended up getting the Steelers wide receivers coach. They got obviously several coaches from the Rams. They kept some of Arthur Smith's coaches that Raheem likes. So they have a very like interesting kind of mixed coaching staff of a bunch of different regimes, and that can go really well because you get all these different ideas. It can also create friction, so I imagine like some of the holdovers from the previous regime are probably I don't think it's like a hot seat thing, but it's like you don't know exactly how everyone's going to work together until you actually get into the season. So I know there could be potential friction perhaps with the offensive line. It seems like in Los Angeles and with the Shanahan schemes in general, teams are running a lot more man, gap concept stuff. And so far the Falcons have not done any of that. So I don't know if that's like a choice that they're making. Like we're just going to stick with the outside zone and that's going to be our bread and butter, which that's expected. But, I don't know what's going on there, but that was definitely something that we thought we'd see more of in Atlanta, was this, mixing in of more different run concepts. But overall, I think Raheem's done a good job. Obviously, he's a talker and very charismatic, and everybody seems to love him. The players love him. The other coaches love him. He's more friendly in general, so I think the media likes that too. But also, like, the staff, especially this camp, was very tight-lipped, and the practices, there was very limited recording. Obviously, there were no fans allowed this year in Atlanta because of construction. So the team, that definitely rubbed some the wrong way as well. It was kind of this odd, yeah, it's like, we're really friendly, but also, like, you can't look at anything, because we don't trust you with it or something. So this is a little bit odd vibes there, but so far the Falcons are pretty much on schedule to where I think any like non-Homer fan would have put them. Like, obviously they I think more people expected they'd beat the Steelers in week 1. Get that Arthur Smith revenge. They did not. The offense just didn't look ready, and they called a very bizarre game for Kirk Cousins in week 1 that apparently was not related to his health. It was just they called that, I guess.
Sure, it wasn't.
But then the next week, all the things they said, he can do, he did do. So I don't know. Maybe it was just a bizarre game plan, but they do beat the Eagles, which obviously that's the more important of the games that they've played so far. So that's great. And then, the Chiefs, they take them down to the wire. Probably should have had an opportunity to win that game, but,
thank you, refs.
Can't go back. Yeah, right. Thanks, refs. Yeah. It goes both ways, so we'll see. So, how that plays out over the course of the season. But, it's I think the Falcons are about where they expect to be at this point. So I think people are still pretty happy with the Raheem Morris hire. We'll see how it plays out.
It's just funny because there's so many similarities between the Falcons and the Saints right now, in so many bizarre ways that you're just like, these teams don't even like each other, but somehow they've emulated obviously the players with like Caden Ellis and David Onyemata, Terry Fontenot in the front office, right? But even just the circumstances of like, hey, it's a new head coach. We're gonna forget about what happened with the Jets. Or no, not with the Bucks, and we're gonna try it out, and we'll see what happens, right?
And what he had to say about the facility being under construction,
right? The facility under construction, so no one got to see practice this season, right? You bring in a kind of an also-ran quarterback who people think, hey, I think he's pretty good, but he's never really won anything in the playoffs. So you gotta look at it that way, and it's a new scheme that's really just from the Shanahan trees. They're doing a lot of the same stuff. It's just very funny. Now you're looking at teams who have 2 key players missing from their offensive line at the same week. You're like, oh, how can they survive this? I don't know. It's just very funny to look at it and see all of these things all kind of coming together. We even both dealing with hurricane stuff at the same series. I don't know. It's
uncanny. Yeah.
It's like the Spider-Man meme. We're all pointing at each other.
Right.
How worried, we were talking about the offense here. Do we have to be about Kyle Pitts? Because we just saw Dallas Goedert with the Eagles have a career day against the Saints. And even now with this Demario, the Davis injury popping up seems to be even a bigger concern, at least for me with Pitts. I know he's dealt with injuries, but just curious how he's been acclimating, I guess, this year. Are they using him anymore? I know the stats don't always tell the whole story on things.
Yeah, I think they've been utilizing him a lot. Like I know in week 1 played like 90+% of snaps. I think he's been out there pretty much as like they're taking a very Rams approach to their personnel where they're going to have the same guys out there almost every snap. Like since week 1, they played more 12 personnel, but at about halfway through week 1, they switched to 11 personnel with Pitts as the tight end. And they basically played that personnel group with Pitts out there and the 3 receivers pretty much ever since. I do wonder if with offensive line injuries, we'll get the other tight end on the field more. Maybe they'll go to more 12 in this game. We'll see, especially if Davis is out, maybe try to get more linebackers on the field for the Saints instead of more corners, because the Saints seem to have corners coming out, of the woodwork now with all these corners. So probably as few of those guys on the field as possible would be great. But I think they want to get Pitts is the guy that they want to get more targets for. I think after week 1, it was we got to get more targets for London. Then London's had a bunch of targets. Then it was we got to get these other receivers involved. Then like Mooney's got 8 receptions last week or something. And Ray McLeod has been a nice surprise in terms of their wide receiver 3. Pitts has had big catches, especially in week 1. And then last week he had, a critical catch down to the 1 that they were able to, score off of. That was a big deal and probably should have had the pass interference in the end zone, but that's the last time I'm going to bring it up. I promise.
I don't blame you.
There's a no call that we talk about pretty frequently.
We still bitch about it. So.
Yeah. But so I think they definitely want to get him involved, and particularly if Davis isn't in there. I think they're gonna. I think they really like Pitts as like their over the middle guy. They want to get him, I think, as their deep pass guy. I think he's one of their targets that they'd love to throw the ball to deep, but a lot of that hinges on the protection, and that's been really spotty so far. Week 2 against the Eagles, they did a great job.
Right.
And like, it was like, wow, okay. Like after week 1, I was expecting a bloodbath again, and nope, they pretty much shut down the Eagles pass rush all game. Cousins looked very good in that game, especially after halftime. But against the Chiefs, it was the same thing. It was like, oh, we're getting, we're starting to get it going. We scored 2 touchdowns in the first half. This looks great. And then 2 offensive line injuries within 5 plays, and then the protection's falling apart again. So, we'll have to see if the protection holds up. I think with Pitts, he's a guy they want. For whatever reason, his stuff is mostly like longer developing plays and stuff over the middle and deep shots. So I think part of his involvement will come more with if Cousins has time, and then that really is going to depend on if they give him any time this week. We'll see. I mean, it's funny because the 2 offensive linemen the Falcons lost are probably the teams, like, other than Lindstrom, the best like run blockers on the team. They were always just sort of like average pass blockers that just were amazing run blockers, so you kind of dealt with it. The guys that are replacing them are probably about as good pass protectors. They're just not as good run blockers. So, it's who knows if the protection will actually be significantly worse this week, but I think that the hit you'll see with those offensive linemen will be in the run game more than likely.
Hey, we know Storm Norton. He was here last year.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, again, just another example of like these weird connections between the Saints and Falcons. But, it's funny. At this point in the season, normally I'd be looking at the Falcons and be like, I don't know a ton about them because I haven't had a chance to watch a ton of their games. That's not true this year, because each of the last 2 weeks, they've not only played in prime time, but they've played the team the Saints are playing. Well, that's not true. They're one of the next Saints opponents is the one they're playing. So the Eagles obviously played the Falcons, so I watched that game very closely. And then the Eagles played the Chiefs, so I watched that game very closely because that's the Saints get to eat the Falcons this week. Or the Falcons play the Chiefs. I think I said Eagles. Falcons this week, then Chiefs next week. So it's like I've actually watched a ton more Falcons games than I wanted to. But one thing that I can't get past as I watch Kirk, and maybe he's going to get healthier as the season goes on, I don't know, but that dude does not look like he can move. Not like even like Kirk Cousins has never been a mobile guy, but he's always been a guy who can at least kind of extend plays, right? Like he can move in the pocket, but particularly, in week 1, and maybe he'll get better as the season goes on, but it sure seems like if you get any pressure on him whatsoever, he's bailing. I can't remember if it was the Chiefs game or the Eagles game where it was like, he has 2 guys. If he takes a step to the right and, extends the play for a second, he's got 2 guys for a touchdown before the half, and he just airmails it out of bounds. You're like, what was that? I guess, how concerned are you about that? Because if I'm a team looking at that, I'm like, I'm sending A-gap pressure every play, especially with the center down. Yeah. And like the Saints aren't a team that sends a lot of A-gap pressure, but I fully expect, even if Demario's not out there, you get some of these maybe slightly more athletic, younger linebackers out there. I'm sending pressure up the middle all day long because I know he can't handle it. How concerned are you about that going forward?
Yeah, I mean, he needs to. I think like a lot of it with him. I mean, he's definitely not 100%. I think the team claiming that he was ridiculous. But I think with Kirk, like, I think a lot of it's confidence related, and I think we've seen him get a little bit more confident every week, especially with like ripping some throws and stuff like that. Like week 1, it just looked like he had no confidence to even the balls were dying even going to the sideline. Week 2 was better after he hit a big play to Ray McLeod, and then after that, he seemed like he got his mojo back a little bit, and then they did that game-winning drive where he just started hitting those deeper shots. Yeah. And I think like his limitations are obviously he's not going to be able to move a bunch at this point, and I still think he can't drive the ball with full velocity off that injured leg. So the total deep game and some of the stuff to the outside, the balls are a little bit slower than you would want, and like he just hasn't handled pressure extremely well. To his credit, he does get rid of the ball. That's always kind of been his thing. In week 1, he got rid of the ball by throwing it to the Steelers. After that game, he's been a little bit better about not doing that. But yeah, I mean, there was definitely a play against the Chiefs where there's an easy first down pickup with your legs if you just take off, and he just didn't do it. Like, he just kind of saw the hole there. He saw that they dropped 8 and were rushing 3. There was a giant hole to the right, and he did eventually take off, but it was like a couple seconds slow. And to me, I think that's like a confidence thing. Like, if you're trusting that your ability to go get a couple of yards with your legs, then you're just taking off when you see that hole. But I don't think he's got that confidence with the movement skills yet. He's starting to get it back more as a passer, which is great. But yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you're going to need him to be able to move to go up against some of the better pass rushers in the NFL. You can't just be a statue. So.
One of the things we were talking about, obviously, these teams being almost mirror images of each other. We talked about some of the things with, training camp practices, the injury issue, and we talked offensive line, but also, Demario's hurt. Matthew Judon popped up, I know, on the injury report as well. Not on there Wednesday, came on Thursday. Any indication of how serious this hamstring issue was? It something that happened in practice?
We didn't hear anything really about it, and no one that was there noticed anything. So I don't know if it's more of a maintenance thing. We'll probably not know more until this afternoon, but no one talked about it. I don't know what that means. It was kind of just okay, he was limited.
It does not exist.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but yeah, at this point, it seems like it might be more maintenance related, or they're just giving guys a little bit of rest. But guess we'll see. I mean, that would obviously be a critical one. Bijan, I don't think there's any concern about Bijan's availability, but if he's not healthy, that's obviously a big one too. So,
no question. Talking to Kevin Knight, host and producer of Dirty Birds and Brews podcast covering the Atlanta Falcons. And so let's do a little alternative history here, or future, prognostication, whatever you want to call it. So if the Falcons lose this game, and obviously you don't want to predict a loss, I'm not telling you to say, hey, the Falcons are going to lose this game, but if the Falcons lose this game and end up 1-3, you're in a really precarious situation, because I feel like you drafted a quarterback in the first round, and people are going to be like, well, why don't we play the rookie quarterback? And so my question is, if you start 1-3, at what point do you feel like you have to go to the rookie quarterback? Because there's a certain point where it's is the season lost? What's the value of sticking with a veteran quarterback if he's not getting the job done? Because at a certain point, 1-3, 1-4, where are you? So I guess where do you stand on that? At what point would you feel like, hey, we should just see what the rookie quarterback has?
Yeah, I mean, after week 1, and we saw that ridiculous game plan that they put out, I was like, okay, if Cousins can't line up under center or run play action, Penix should be playing right now, because if he can't execute basic offensive concepts, he shouldn't be on the field. That's a big red flag. Now, apparently that was not the case, and he could do those things. They just, I guess, we're trying to get him warmed up or something. I don't know. But I think with Cousins, if he can execute the offense, and I think over the last 2 weeks, it's clear that he can execute the offense. I don't think there's any chance of Penix coming in anytime soon. I think once the team has been eliminated or things like that, they might play him. But I don't think there's any plans to play Penix this year unless, they need him for injury related reasons, or if Kirk was like in week 1 where they're we're just going to run everything out of shotgun and pistol and he's not going to do any play action. If they're going to do that, then we have to see Penix, because that's way too much of your playbook you're cutting out. But at this stage, I don't think they're planning to play Penix. Obviously that could change, but they've also you look at the Falcons schedule, this is an extremely front-loaded schedule. They've played the number 1 strength of schedule in the NFL so far. That's probably going to continue over the next 2 weeks, and then it slows down a lot. So I think that the coaching staff is going to take that and be like, well, if we're 1-3 or whatever, we can blame the schedule and we're not going to make big changes. And there's something to that. But yeah, I mean, this is a critical 3-game stretch. For the Falcons, I like to call it the NFC South Gauntlet, because it's Falcons, Bucks, Panthers back to back. So, I think the Falcons want to come out of that at least 2-1, and obviously the Saints is the one that everybody wants to win. But if they can get wins against the Bucks and Panthers too, or just those two, then they'll be okay. But yeah, I mean, they got to start getting some wins now. You can say everything you want about, we played a really rough opening, we had to play the champs, we had to go to Philly. You do win the one in Philly, which that's unexpected, but now you got to take care of business at home, against against the Saints. And this game I think is critical for both teams because the NFL at large is looking at this game like this will probably be one of the most watched 1:00 games because we want to know like who these teams are. Like the Saints had that tremendous start. Like everyone was, I know even Saints fans were kind of depressed about this team going into the season. And it's like, okay, maybe it's not so depressing. Then, the Eagles come to town. It kind of looks a little bit disappointing, right? Low scoring game, tough game. And then the Falcons, it's like embarrassing performance against the Steelers where you hold them to field goals and you can't win. So that's not great. Then you go win at the last minute in Philly and everyone's back in. And then, you almost beat the champs. So it's like, I think these two teams are kind of at that stage where they're like, no one really knows what we've got here. Like the Saints could be really good. The Falcons could be really good, but it's sort of like we're teetering on like the winner of this game is probably going to get the hype and the loser is going to be like, oh, well, they are what we thought they were or whatever, cliche is going to be out there. But definitely a critical one.
Yeah, no question. And it's like I've always said like if week 4 always feels so pivotal because 2-2 or 1-3 or 3-1, those records feel so they're only one game each apart, but they feel so different. And saying, hey, we could be 3-0 doesn't mean a lot when you end up going 1-3. So it's going to be interesting. But you could also have a situation where there's 3 teams. Heck, you could have 4 teams in the NFC South at 2-2 after this week if the Fighting Andy Daltons continue their whatever you want to call
How long do you think that Dalton bump's going to last for Carolina?
Oh, I don't know. It lasted for 1 week in Saints land when he got here. So he plays well enough to get the other quarterback benched, but then not well enough to actually do anything of significance. So we're at that stage of grief for the Panthers right now. But
since he's struggling though, so they're prime picking right now.
They are like the Panthers, Andy Dalton, the revenge game. So
there you go. But all right. Thanks so much, Kevin Knight, host, producer, Dirty Birds and Brews, coming on here to talk Saints, Falcons, 1 p.m. Eastern time, noon Central. I'll be out there, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Always fun. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kev.
All right. Thanks again to Kevin for coming on. And we're going to get into this in the X Factor segment, but like these injuries, however they play out, are going to, whoever manages it better is going to win this game. Let's be real. And, I don't even know what to expect, to be completely honest. Like Storm Norton kind of sucked when he was here. So like there's a reason he ended up on the practice squad and the Falcons plucked him off the practice squad. But if he's at right tackle, I'm teeing off on him. If whatever that backup center's name, I can't even recall off the top of my head. If he's going to be in there, and I'm going to try to tee off on him, and the Falcons are going to do the same thing on the other side. So we'll see how it goes. I'm not as worried as you are about Kyle Pitts. I genuinely am not. I don't think Kyle Pitts is going to be a huge factor.
I'm hoping not. Like I said, just because of the Dallas Goedert stat line last game and just him seemingly being uncoverable.
But Pitts is not a tight end. Like that's the thing. Like Pitts plays like a wide receiver. So it's not even like it's like if they had TJ Hawkinson or like George Kittle or somebody like that, like we took a look at Kyle Pitts and say, oh, he's a tight end, so he's going to be hard to cover. Like, sure, but he plays in such a way that you can put a cornerback on him and feel good. Like last year, I think they had Marshawn shadowing him. Like you can do that to Kyle Pitts, and you cannot do that to a guy like Dallas Goedert. You have to double him because he's big. Kyle Pitts is just, I don't know. Like I've never felt like Kyle Pitts was a game changer. Only the Falcons did. Because
I will say that for whatever reason, Drake London looks ginormous.
He is. He's huge. Drake London and Kyle Pitts are not that dissimilar in size. Seriously. Like, let's look at what they're listed at. Let's look at the Falcons roster right now. What are Drake London?
It just really stood out to me like this year, like you said, getting to watch more Falcons games than typical. And I don't know, I was like, did the receiver get bigger? Because I didn't think
he probably did. I mean, these guys, he's in what, year 3? Like this is when like they really like the weight training really kind of hits in. Like Chris Olave is a lot bigger than he was going in. So Drake London, 6'4", 213. Kyle Pitts, 6'6", 246, which I don't believe that, 246. But like there's not that huge of a difference. We're talking about a wide receiver to a tight end.
No, like I said, Drake looks like he took some ate his Wheaties going into this season or whatever, just because he stood out as a bigger receiver to me for sure.
Yeah, no, he's a big dude. I mean, that's what he does better than any of those other receivers in the draft with him, right? Like I think he went before Olave, right? I think he went. Olave went 10. He went 8 or 9. And but yeah, like you look at Gary Wilson, you look at Olave, you look at Jameson Williams, the other guys in that draft, Jahan Dotson. Like what Drake had to set him apart was that size. And I think to his credit, I think Kirk is probably better at using that than either of the other guys were with Drake. So we'll see how that goes. But all right, let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about X factors, what could swing this matchup. I kind of foreshadowed it a bit there, but we will get into it as always. I'm Jeff Nowak. He is Steve Geller, getting ready for Saints at Falcons week 4 in Atlanta. It's been raining a lot in Atlanta, so we'll see how that goes.
Atlanta.
They had apparently their first like flash flood emergency in like ever. So that's not great. But we'll get into it. We'll get into all of it. Who dat? Go Saints. We'll be right back. And we're back. One more segment to go here on Inside Black and Gold, getting ready for Saints at Falcons. Saints 2-1, Falcons 1-2. Hopefully they're 1-3, and hopefully the Bucks are 2-2. Yeah, hopefully there's a chance the Saints are the only 3-1 team in the division this week, and that would be a nice thing. But in this segment, we're going to break
into existence.
Speak it into existence, exactly. But in this segment, we're going to break down X factors for this matchup. We'll hit one on offense and defense. We'll do one a piece, and I'm going to cheat and kind of make it very vague. But Steve, let's start with the offense. What is your X factor on offense?
How is this offensive line going to hold up? Obviously, huge questions. Center position. Also, now with the concern that Cesar Ruiz might not be in the game. And just the being able to obviously protect Carr, get the run game to be going too, but then any depth issues, because if there is another injury, I don't know what this team's going to do, honestly.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like, yeah, I mean, you're already testing your depth, and
that was a huge concern going into the year,
right? And where is your depth behind that depth that doesn't it'll be interesting to see how they split it up, like Oli Udoh versus Landon Young. Oli Udoh was the guy who got in at left guard, but I think that was more about Landon Young being hurt going into last week. I think he didn't practice at all.
Yeah.
And so I think he was kind of your emergency 8th lineman. And so this week, I think if he's healthy, it's Landon, because I think they like Landon. And Landon's a guy who has put in the work, right? Like he's a guy who did not play guard his entire life, not in Pee Wee football, not in high school, not in college until last year. And they had him take some reps there. And then this offseason, they came to him before the season and were like, hey, we need you to try to play guard. Can you do it? And he's like, I'll do it, because he wants to be that kind of versatile dude. So, hey, I mean, this is going to be an opportunity for him if he gets in there. He played in the second half against the Panthers. He played reasonably well, so there's some confidence there because Lucas Patrick missed the second half of that game with a toe issue. So if he has to get in, I feel okay about it. Now, if he gets hurt and comes out, probably Oli would go in. But it's going to be interesting to see how they shake it up. If they maybe elevate a guy from the practice squad and Kyle Hergel. Chris Reed, they signed. He's the guy who can play guard and center. He's a veteran. So I doubt he's going to be a guy you bring up this week because he's just literally just learning the offense.
Well, like you mentioned, he is a veteran, though, too, that maybe you could plug and play him. I don't know.
Not this week. No, you can't pick up an NFL offense in 3 days. It's just impossible. It's just not going to happen. Like you'd look at Kyle Hergel first. If you did need to call somebody up, and because you did sign Shane Lemieux to the active roster, so he's already there. So that fills one of those spots, and we'll see. But yeah, you're not trying to plug and play that guy. That's a desperation thing. If you had no other choice,
right?
But if you have anyone who actually knows the offense, you're going to go with them over. Like, that's the thing. Like, people will be like, hey, sign this guy off this practice squad, sign this guy off this practice squad. The issue is, like, if you sign somebody off a practice squad, then you have to put them on your active roster. And then, like, you kind of lose the ability to call up one of these guys from the practice squad. So I don't know. But I agree with you. I think that's going to be the biggest offensive X factor. And I'm not going to give you another one other than, hey, can you run the ball? But, like, so to me, the question is, it's not so much about pass protection. It's about, can you avoid the level of interior pressure that you had in that game, because I think that's what blew it up. Like if you're a quarterback and you got pressure coming around the edge, you can handle that, especially a veteran quarterback who understands how to move in the pocket. You can create angles and you can step away. It's really tough to do that if you're looking downfield and you're trying to go through your progressions, and then suddenly there's a big 300-pound dude in your face who not only creates an issue with the passing lane, but you can't even get to your checkdowns. That happened a couple times for Derek in that game last week of like, okay, I want to get the ball out. I have time, but I have nowhere to throw it because he's just going to bat it down like a big grizzly bear. And the Jalen Carter just got his hand on like 3 different passes.
So we have to worry about a David Onyemata revenge game.
Yeah, and so like, David Onyemata getting up the middle and creating pressure on Tom Brady is a big reason you were able to win those matchups with the Bucs when you won them, right? That 38-3 game, go back and watch the tape. That interior pressure is what blew it up, and the interior pressure I think is going to be what the Saints try to generate too. But I asked Derek Carr about it. That specifically, this is what he said.
A lot of pressure in up the middle in the interior in that game that you probably didn't see weeks 1 or 2. How limiting is that? How much does that change what you feel like you can do on offense? And throughout the course of that game, were there things that you wanted to get to but you just couldn't because of that pressure?
Yeah, there's definitely times where it's tough, but at the same time, like one thing I just made a commitment, I had to be better, even if that is the case, this season. So I'm just going to stand in there, hopefully if I can, get out and make a run, if there's an alley or something, get out. But, for me, I'm going to hang in there. I'm going to make my reads and do what's best, as long as I can hang in there, in those moments. And so it's football, that stuff's going to happen. And so, I definitely thought we made strides there, but there's definitely times where you're like this or this, and you got to make a decision based on how every game flows. If you're running it good, you want to keep running. If you're not throwing it good, you got to do this. There's, offense coordinators are making those decisions like in their brain, like every single play throughout a game, and so there's definitely I think times where Clint would probably answer that better than me. But yeah, I definitely think that's something.
I didn't know.
Yeah, and so we said a couple things there. One is, okay, I made a commitment this year to just standing in and being willing to take hits, and that's great until you get hurt doing it. But I mean, that is what you look at. Like, there's a lot of complaints about that. The final throw and the interception, and I did ask him about that. It's like, yeah, I probably should have just tried to dirt it in a way that I didn't, like try to make everything happen there rather than just throwing it in such a way that it bounced off the turf would have been probably the ideal scenario. But that is an example of him saying like, I'll take a hit here to deliver the ball. And you need a guy who's willing to do that to win in the NFL. So that's a positive thing. The other thing he said was Clint could answer that question better than I could. And normally when guys say that, by the time I end up talking to Clint, I have forgotten to actually ask that question. But yesterday I remembered, so I did ask Clint that question. And this is how Mr. Kubiak answered it.
How do you feel like Derek handled that throughout the course of the game?
I thought Derek had a really good game. I've been really impressed with him. And, every opportunity he had to make a big time throw in a clutch situation, I thought he did. So then I was really impressed with him. Yeah, prize is kind of the flow of the game, but it does, definitely does. But that's every defense in the NFL gives you those types of looks and that interior pressure. And this week will be no different. He's a really good front.
But yeah, so first, Clint didn't answer the question any better. Second, one thing he did want to make sure to say was like, hey, I think Derek played well. And I think there's going to be criticism on the quarterback when you have a game where you score 15 points or 12 points and you lose that in that way. But no, I mean, when you're dealing with that level of pressure to not like turn the ball over throughout the game in ways that take that game away from you early, right? To take sacks constantly, to constantly be on the ground, fumbles, that sort of thing. It's I think that's an underrated part of Derek's game that keeps you out of those negative game script situations when you can't run the ball, when you can't drop back. You look at the film and, it's tough because I don't think that necessarily if they could have just protected a little better, there were ways to take advantage of that defense. You talk about that 6-1 front that Philly was running that, I think you're probably going to end up seeing again if the Saints can't handle it. I just think a lot of it was like, you can attack that. There's openings in that. There's a reason you don't want 6 guys on the line of scrimmage because that forces you to cover with linebackers and deep safeties. But if you can block it up, you can attack it. The Saints just couldn't block it up. So I just think giving Derek an extra half second, even in some of these situations, you can make those looks hurt, and it's just going to be a matter of whether they can do it. And I assure you, at some point in this game, Raheem Morris, or who, obviously he doesn't call the defenses, but that Falcons defense is going to show you similar looks to what the Eagles showed you, and you just got to handle it better. That's the fact. Like, you got to handle it better up front, and so hopefully they can do that.
Well, that's the scary part, obviously, because there's a lot of questions with this game, just up and down the O-line, and thankfully, I guess we can say that the Falcons offense might have the same issues, obviously, with them. Their issues on the O-line too, where the defense for the Saints, I expected to dominate the matchup anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying on the offensive line, like, you had time to prepare this week. Like, the last week, it was always going to be a struggle. You lose your center on the third play of the game. It's hard to make those adjustments in real time. Now, with the week to prepare, you'd hope that, hey, if we see those types of looks again, you handle it better. But yeah, let's flip over to the other side of the ball. And what is your, I mean, you kind of said it there, but what's your X factor for the defense?
Definitely bottle up Bijan and, kind of force Cousins to beat you.
Yeah. And I mean, that's tough, because it's like, I
know he's had success against the Saints.
Like, I want to force Cousins to win the game too, but like, that's kind of you're always going to say is like, yeah, you're never going to say like, don't stop the run. So I don't know if that's an X factor so much as like, I think to me, it's going to be how the Saints use their linebackers. And especially if you don't have Demario,
right?
Do you change that plan around? And Deuce McAllister talked about this in terms of how he thinks the Saints should attack. And I thought he had a good take on it. So here's that.
I am sending the kitchen sink at him, and really, it's not really from the outside. I know Alontae Taylor is, he's got 4 sacks and he's come off the edge. I'm going to send that as well, but I am showing double A gap. And Kirk, you're either going to be in shotgun and getting the ball out of your hands, but if you're under center, 1, I'm testing your new center that you have here, and 2, I'm going to see if you can move, because if the pressure can get there in your face and you can't move out of the way, then I know I have a pretty good chance that ball's got to come out hot. I cannot allow you to sit back there and be able to just dissect my defense and get it to the weapons that you have on the edge. And it looks like they're starting to get it to a lot of those weapons out there on the edge. They've got a lot of pretty toys at the running back position, the tight end, and the receiver position. The question is, can the quarterback get it to him consistent? And I'm sending the sink at him. I am sending the sink at him.
Yeah, and I think that's the right approach. And this is not a Saints team that has been blitzing its linebackers a ton. You've been sending a good bit of pressure off the edges. You don't see the Saints kind of walk up like you watched the Cowboys do it all game, where they kind of walk up those 2 linebackers into the A gaps, which is the gaps on either side of the center, and just show that pressure. And you don't always bring it, but you force the offense to account for it. And sometimes you drop out, sometimes you bring one, sometimes you bring both. Sometimes you bring both. And I just think I agree. I think that's going to be something you do this week if you're the Saints, in terms of, I want to force them to have to do whatever they have to do to try to stop that, especially if you don't have Demario and you want to maybe limit some of those looks for the Falcons to attack. Because if you get pressure on Kirk, it's over. Now, like, I don't know if maybe he's going to get better at avoiding pressure at extending plays, but Cam kind of said this, like, stopping Bijan is difficult, but it's a lot easier to stop a running back when you don't have to worry about the quarterback. And that was last week. Like, one of the reasons you were able to extend plays and get the ball downfield to Dallas Goedert was Jalen Hurts is able to extend a play. And I'm not worried about that with the Falcons. I can send pressure. I can let them pin their ears back in passing situations and not be worried about what if he gets out in the backside and has 20 yards to run. It's not happening with the Falcons. So that makes your life as a defensive coordinator a lot easier. So I just don't have the same level of concern about Bijan as I had about Saquon. And we'll see. Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, definitely he doesn't have the O-line that the Eagles have.
Right. I mean, there's a lot of things that Bijan doesn't have that the Eagles have.
But we mentioned, though, there's that you could be, clogging them up and cutting down the big runs, those 3-4 yard, little nicks in the armor. But then he's got that ability that can break a 78 yarder easily.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And the thing is, you won't be in as many kind of cover zero looks against the Falcons as you were against that's one of the reasons that run went for what it did is because there was no one over the top, right? If you're going to play cover zero, you better make a tackle at the line because there's no one's chasing that guy down. And so I just don't think you're going to have as many of those looks as you would have against the Falcons or against the Eagles, just because that Jalen is someone has to account for him. You don't have to do that with Kirk. So I just think how the linebackers play in this game is going to be the X factor. And if it's not Demario, it's going to be, okay, can Willie Gay play conservative enough while also generating pressure? I worry about Willie sometimes because I think he gets a little bit too ahead of over his skis on some of these rushes, and he is susceptible to big plays if he gets kind of pushed out of his gap. Anthony Orji, we really haven't seen get much of anything. If he gets out there, we haven't really seen him have to deliver in these scenarios outside of the preseason. So we'll find out. I don't know if maybe you keep Willie at Sam and move Pete Werner to Mike if Demario can't go, and have Anthony play the Will linebacker spot. I don't know. Either way, it's going to be interesting to watch how they split it all up, because we just haven't had to see them do that. And it might be a moot point if Demario does get out there and he's effective. But either way, to me, that's the biggest thing, because I know the Saints can cover, right? I know the safeties are going to do their jobs. I know the defensive line can get pressure on the edge. I just don't know what the linebackers are going to do.
Me with the running back position too. Tyler Algiel's a concern too. I know he's not superstar and it doesn't get a ton of headlines, and obviously, but I still think he's a problem, and a guy that that's a 1-2 punch Atlanta has. That is the scariest thing to me, honestly.
Yeah, he runs hard, and he runs physical, and he gets those 2-3 yard runs that you need in those hard moments, right? And it's important to have with a guy like Algier. That's one of my critiques of the Eagles is they don't really have that guy with Saquon, right? But I guess Jalen is that guy, so maybe you do, because there were no backup running back. Saquon got all of the runs in that game. There was no, this guy comes in for a 3rd and short. Right. It's either Saquon or Jalen running the ball. In this offense, it's going to be, a heavy dose of Bijan, and then probably 2/3 of that with Tyler. And Tyler has been effective against the Saints in the past. They have had a hard time getting him to the ground. And I do think when you're constantly gearing up for a guy like Bijan, and then suddenly someone shows up with a sledgehammer, it's just geez, we got to deal with this too. That's tough. So I agree with you. I think that's bottling him up is probably more important. Just because I want to keep them in down and distances where they feel like they have to throw.
Well, we know the Kirk Cousins record might not be the greatest against the Saints, but he's had pretty damn good stats. So obviously a guy we rave about the Saints secondary, but giving him any kind of time is not going to be good news, obviously.
No question. And this is the game last year where everything kind of went off the rails for the Saints. So, I think, even at 2-1, you have a better record than the Falcons. Falcons are 1-2. I almost feel like there's more pressure on the Saints in this game, because otherwise you're just kind of in a repeat cycle, right? Where we started 2-0. That was fun. Now it's all terrible all the time. If you go out, win this game, you're 3-1. You walk into Kansas City with kind of house money. And see what happens. Worst case scenario, you walk out of there 3-2 with another divisional matchup that you need to go and win. If you lose this game, it could get really ugly really fast, right? And you could end up going in, facing the Broncos on Thursday night on a 4-game losing streak if things don't go your way, right? Because you're going to be hosting Tampa, you're going to be hosting the Broncos in back-to-back weeks after facing Kansas City. You're going to have back-to-back short weeks, so we'll have to see. But either way, that's the matchup. I'm excited for it. Hopefully the crowd is not. Hopefully, there's a good contingent of Saints fans out there in Atlanta. I think there will be.
I wonder if Ludo will be there this time.
I don't think so. I went so terribly for them last year. I don't think they're going to have another, celebration of hip hop in that building for a long time. They couldn't figure out the microphones. It was a mess. Hopefully, there's no pick sixes
on their end.
Yeah, hopefully we get a pick six. That would be nice. When was the last time I got a pick six? Was it against the Eagles? They should have had one against the Falcons in the last matchup, but Tyrann decided to go down on the one and create that whole Yeah, that'll be Hornets nest.
No, it might be Marshawn against the Eagles. You might be right.
I'm pretty sure it was. And that would have been 2022 with the Andy Dalton. That would have been week 17, week 16.
Yeah.
That kind of Christmas week, Gabe.
In Philly.
It was the week after. I think that was your last game on the sideline.
Good old Philadelphia.
Yep. The link. But all right. Let's wrap up this podcast. Thanks everyone who hung out. We will be coming back at you on Monday with our post-game pod. Hopefully it is a Saints win and our 3-1 and in control of the NFC South pod. If not, we'll be inconsolable.
Yeah, we'll have the somber music, be wearing cloaks and, saying prayers, I guess. I don't know.
Cloaks? What is this, Halloween pod?
Yeah, there you go. Coming up.
We'll see. But all right, y'all. Thanks for listening. Yikes. Who dat? Go Saints. Easy, y'all.
Beat the birds.
Peace.